We're back for another Embodied Love Lounge episode, and today we're going to talk about something that's maybe a little controversial.
Maybe a little polarizing?
I don't know. But we want to talk about it because, at least for me, I get aggravated with the topic of, being more feminine, less feminine, more masculine, less masculine. We need to be hyper-polarized. I think sometimes the polarization is actually part of the problem. And then also people are like, well, then if there's no polarization, there's no magnetism and there's no juiciness between people. They've lost that yum. So we're going to jump into that.
I'd also say, too, that what you're irritated with isn't just the terms masculine, feminine. It's
No.
It's not like an ideological, no, you need to find the right lexical words to define this so that it's inclusive or whatever.
It's more, I'm looking for all of us to feel more at home with who we are, more at home with how can we just be ourselves instead of some ideal of something. I think there's a lot of, in the landscape of polarity work,
yes,
there's a lot of ideology and there's not a lot of realism. There's a lot of odd practices that actually aren't that useful when it comes to real relational dynamics and actual sex.
And the way I'm looking at this when we've spoken about it is really, how does a person feel their way to their essence, whatever you want to call it, as opposed to what they believe they should be, and then therefore doing practices that should further charge that one side of themselves,
yes,
and then hopefully find the other half.
Well, I remember I have a lot of clients, women, who have come to me and they're like, I need to be more feminine. I'm not feminine enough. And trust me, this is a topic I've been looking at for decades because of this strange idea that I'm not feminine enough. I need to be more feminine. And so one of my responses that I use a lot, which you can bounce off of if you like, is that, okay, if you go up to a lioness and you're like, you're not lionessy enough, you need to be more lionessy, she would look at you and then probably bite you or kill you. But she was just like, it wouldn't make sense. It doesn't make sense. Tree, you need to be more tree-like. We are as feminine as we are. We are as masculine as we are. These are inherent forces within our own being. They're not something that you can actually be more or less of. That's a strange thing. It's like saying, you can be less hydrated and more hydrated because water intake is a part of having a body. But there's other aspects of our being that are just inherent, and they don't become more or less with activities and time. It's just, how are we expressing it? Are we attuned to it? Are we aligned to it? Are we using our own language and words to allow that part of ourselves to come forward? And I'm also really tired of this idea that feminine is this dainty little thing over here that's receptive and it needs to be kept safe and coy. I'm like, a lioness is very feminine, but you also don't mess with her. And she is an incredible hunter, but a lot of the time she's just laying around sleeping. There's a character trait to this being. Being a human being also has particular elements to it. So you can tell it's a pet peeve. I'd love some thoughts from you on just this part, and then kind of move us into how is it not useful to think this way? And then what could we do? Because I think people know inherently what that means, but they have the wrong language, so they never can access it.
Tell me what you mean by that last part.
Well, when a person is saying, I need to be more feminine, I'm not feminine enough, in my understanding of what they're attempting to say to me is, I don't seem to have the capacity to really let something in, to really receive that thing, whether it's a compliment,
yes,
whether it's support, whether it is love, whether it is pleasure, or whatever it might be, that there's a little bit of inhibition or discomfort or just even disorientation on, well, how do I manage this sensation now that is going through me? But because there's not enough exploration of this element of the landscape, let's say, we don't have very good vocabulary. And because we don't have good vocabulary, then the thing we default to is the in vogue information, which is, oh, you're just not feminine enough. That's the problem. You need to become more feminine, and you're overly masculine. The problem with everyone is because everyone's in their masculine. What does that even mean to a person?
Well, that's the thing. So it becomes more vocabulary. I think the first step in all of this, if we were to kind of go down an exploration, something that when we work with you is to get you in touch with your felt state. What are you actually feeling? Therefore, you're not going to end up choosing, okay, I'm this or I'm that, or I should be this or I should be that, or culture says this or that. Like, these are just thoughts and feelings, and feelings by more just concepts is what I mean. Thoughts and concepts. If we can then get your body to start feeling this, then it's going to be much easier to be able to align towards where you go. So that's the first step, I would say.
So the whole conversation why we're doing this is that people are craving to literally feel more. They want to feel more turn on. They want to feel more when they're actually engaging with the person of their choice. They want to feel more even afterward and not kind of be left empty or depleted or shut down. They want to actually feel more enlivened. So I like that you start us off with this concept of feeling, but you're not just talking about emotion. You're talking sensorially as well.
Yes, exactly.
So the felt experience of being alive. So in this instant, it would be, maybe the body, the touch. Can your skin receive?
Well, what this is going
sensing?
to do is going to allow you to actually feel when you have negative tension that you need to relieve, when you are feeling creative tension that you should actually grow and flourish, or if you're having, just plain out numbness, boredom, if you're not feeling much at all. And from this place, when then you can start to go towards a state of not just internal pleasure, but shared mutual pleasure, because ultimately, if you're doing this to have a relationship, then what do you do? And maybe we can discuss this a little bit more, because you said it's not being about being more feminine or more masculine, because you just are who you are. This, I would say, is that can you charge up that felt state? And therefore, in your essence, in one sense, maybe you could say you're more than that or less, but I'd be interested to hear maybe distinguish between those two.
Well, I think first of all, for every human being that exists, there is a version of a human being that is unique.
Yes.
Therefore, we cannot quantify what is feminine and masculine as a specific number, because each human is so unique, and the combination of both the capacity to receive and feel and experience while also taking action and having good boundaries and communication, like those facets of being human, they vary with all of us, and we can all learn how to do it better. But there's natural tendencies. There's some of us that have a more breathy voice. There's some of us that have more like a growly voice, and we can't really change that. Now, is the breathy voice more feminine? Is the growly voice more masculine? It's a bit like the concept yin and yang. When I studied Taoism a lot in the Taoist practice, yin and yang only exists in relation to each other. If one doesn't exist, the other doesn't. So they need each other to exist. It's a dynamic existence, and it changes all the time. So for example, Vancouver, the city, is yin in comparison to New York City. But when then you compare Vancouver to Hawaii, it is yang in comparison to how yin Hawaii is. So again, it's a dynamic relationship. It depends how you're moving. So myself as a woman, around certain types of people, there's a softening, there's a greater receptivity, a natural kind of way of I will follow more easily. But around other types of people, I'm very intense, and I am the one that's leading and creating the boundaries and making the suggestions. That form of dynamism is healthy, it's good. It doesn't make me less or more. What we're needing to learn, instead of fabricating this scale, is what's true and natural here, and then what's needed in a moment. So maybe what's needed in a moment, say you're really wanting to take leadership in the bedroom, and I'm like somehow like not receiving any leadership, and I'm kind of bumping up against it. What's needed there is, people say, oh, you need to be more feminine. No, what's needed there is, I'm already very feminine. I'm also very intensely masculine. But what's needed there is, am I feeling him Am I receiving him? Maybe you're not feeling seen, you're not feeling felt by me. That then is a different language. And suddenly when I realize, oh, he's really, yeah, I can soften, I can trust this, I can allow this, something else in me engages versus the one that's all day long been leading in the office.
So this is what I see then, is that if you focus so much on what is the polarity that you should be fitting in, then you start to build more of an ideology, more of a concept that you then have to sort of act out.
Yes.
And it isn't always congruent with where you're at. Versus magnetism, you're just building up a charge that creates more magnetism. A magnet doesn't become more of a magnet by trying to have more of a north pole or more of a south pole. It just gets more charged, and then that south pole, north pole inside itself grows, and guess what? Then the right magnets are attracted to each other from greater distances. So in that sense, the empowerment is what we're charging up through developing more of a felt state.
I love that you said that too, because many, many years ago, I sat with someone who had trained very deeply in the Kabbalistic understanding of life, and was sharing that the men and the women have different teachings in this lineage. And she said, there's the way that the men learn how to manifest in the world, which is often like getting out there and putting their word out there and taking action and making something happen. But she said with the women, what they understood about how they manifest is they feel very deeply in themselves, enter that felt state of that thing being true, and suddenly that thing is like pulled toward them. So there's a strong magnetic. Now they're both manifesting.
Yes.
They're both creating. So in that lineage, there's a different orientation. And I don't know that it's right or wrong or up or down or anything like that. It's just ideas that we get to play with.
Well, this is the part that then brings it back to the embodiment. Because when you spoke about going out and manifesting versus, feeling deep inside yourself and then magnetizing towards you, you are speaking at least of the sexual dynamic of, are you the one like doing the penetrating, like giving, or the one that is on the receiving side being penetrated, or actually, as we speak about it, like actually engulfing or swallowing or bringing the person in like a mouth, because then that also brings in that magnetism. So we tie it back to these body practices, and where I would say that I see most of the work being done, because at the end of the day, again, like I said, I look at those who do certain practices, the proof's in the pudding. You take this martial art, that martial art, you put them in the ring. What do you see emerge? You take the art of love and you go ahead and put them in a relationship. What emerges? Well, I am hearing a glorification of the work as if, the best and the highest, loftiest work is digging into the pain. And then sex is something that's sort of like the dessert, the easy part. The bonus afterwards.
Or the makeup sex.
Precisely.
Yeah.
Whereas when you have what I would imagine once you've done the work, or as you're doing the work, you are optimizing towards, the goal. You're optimizing towards, and if you don't like the word goal, you're optimizing towards mutual pleasure. You're optimizing to a relationship that lifts the both of you up. And you might say, well, that's the healthy expression of polarity. But then my question is, do the practices that are actually going to generate the pleasure in the bedroom, not as dessert, because then that is going to be the fuel and the power for better communication and intimacy. And then you will be able to feel your way and actually establish the values that are true to you. Whereas when I look at a lot of polarity practices, it is kind of mindfulness, internal meditations. There's also a lot of kind of role play between people, and then you're trying to live out this value, and then at the very end you hope that the work is done here, and then if there's enough time, the pleasure is over there. And so you have a very different kind of approach, and what I frankly see is that one leads to having more languaging around suffering versus to explain it, which is a great diagnostic tool. But if you really want to actually step into mutual pleasure, then that is what you start to practice and allow that to fuel the rest. Because a sports team, if all they're doing is doing the work of, all the times that they've lost and figuring out like all the bad stuff, but they're not actually winning, they're not actually like scoring points, then they're not succeeding.
Yeah. Well, in hearing these things that you've just explained, and you're bringing it back to, you know, the art of lovemaking, and I think also another thing in the polarity movement is you need to work on the problems in order to be able to have the sexy, hot sex.
Yes.
That's usually the thing. And what we have noticed is sometimes the more that you stay in the mind and kind of go around in circles and then avoid feeling the real feelings underneath the feelings, and you're not actually coming together and creating natural feeling of security because you're moving away from each other and you're shutting down your heart, you're turning your body away. We see this all the time when we work with clients. Sometimes they'll even come on camera and there'll be one all happy to be there and the other one's kind of like turned away and contracted and not even really wanting to be there. But by the end, they're both very much connected and leaning in. And we didn't do a lot of talk therapy. We got their bodies to get into sync, their bodies to feel secure together, and then their bodies to start co-creating a healthy expression of delight or ease in the moment.
And I mean, it's simply this approach. You can go ahead and pit two people off to fight each other, discuss that problem, why they're getting into conflict, and then at the end, you know, okay guys, now sit down and have like a nice meal, have a nice interaction. Well, that's going to create one reality because the focus originally is on the problem. The other one is okay, go in, have the nice meal, have the nice interaction, see what comes up, deal with that, and then get back to the nice interaction. And as you start to have greater and greater more interactions, as you build a stronger and stronger charge inside yourself, first off, as well as then inside a partner with another partner, you then are going to face new challenges, but the challenges are going to be from up here because you've reached these higher states of pleasure. You've reached a higher voltage, you could say, that then you need to make sure that all the wiring and everything between the two of you has a smooth and good flow. Now, if you just imagine what is negative from the beginning, it's going to be difficult to ever really feel what is the possibility and what's actually in the way of that success.
I also feel that we set people up to fail when we give these particular constructs. Like, I can tell you that most ladies are like, yeah, I want a really masculine guy. But then when they have that where the person is only able to be in his active state, he's never receptive, that also doesn't feel really nice. I remember when I used to work a lot with men, and one of the classes I would do, I'd have like a white sheet and I would split it down the middle, and on one side I'd be putting like, you know, really masculine traits and then like sissy traits, right? And I just get the room to yell out words, and I would be putting them down. And then what was remarkable partway through is that I would pause and say, how many of you here are fathers? And a lot of them were. And I said, so if your child comes to you and needs comfort, do you not hold them and close and, you know, calm them down and soothe them? They're like, absolutely, of course I do that. It's my child. I love my child. I'm like, that's nurturing. But you just listed that trait as a sissy trait on here. So,
and do you feel more feminine when you sit there and hold your child?
So I think what I'd like to propose right now in this conversation is sometimes when we throw a concept out, the polarity concept, what happens is we don't see the holistic human. We start to really create these strange things where this is only allowed here and this is only allowed there.
Well, things can become rather dogmatic. And this is the other piece that I also look at as the proof is in the pudding here, is that so many times those that are in search of, you know, really trying to find their polarity and being able to figure out, you know, how can they like really be in their masculine, how can they be in their feminine, when the right time is, and then hopefully you find that right type of in yourself and then you match up perfectly with the other person, is one, where does the relationship evolve? But more importantly is essentially, where do you actually ever come into touch with yourself? where do you truly begin to simply feel and experience? And what I want to do in the second part is talk about, well, how does one build that charge? Because that's how you will then naturally begin to just embody, step into, and attract that which matches you. And more importantly, can you then dynamically stay in that flow with your partner, as opposed to, you need to be this way, I need to be that way.
But that's
like,
the thing.
Magnetism actually drives the dynamic. It's not the understanding of the dynamic that creates the charge.
No, and that's the thing too, is we as human beings stop looking at men, women, masculine, feminine, because those things don't make, just take all those labels away. Look at a human being that is an erotic being. So someone, if you're alive, you're an erotic being. That means you're full of aliveness. And then either you're connected to that aliveness and feeling the energetics of, wow, I'm having an amazing day, I'm inspired, I'm switched on, I feel great. Or I'm having a crappy day, everything's going wrong and I just feel annoyed by it. There's these moments that we all have. And then if you have this expectation, I can only be this way in order for me to be, a real man or a real woman or a masculine creature and a feminine creature, it's not honest. And we are constantly in flux, moment to moment to moment. Why? Look at how we breathe. We expand to allow breath to come in. So we actually create space. That means we're actually receiving a breath. And then what do we do on the out breath? We release that breath. This is a dynamism that is called life. Without that in and out, we would not live.
Well, that's the thing. So that's actually what I really wanted to say is about the proof is in the pudding, is that if you are focusing on building, your masculine charge or your feminine charge or one end of the polarity, and you need to step more into that, then what you're doing is you're creating an imbalance. And this is what I then see all the time, is that the other person is constantly looking for their other half. The other one that's to complement their polarity, and then they can come together to be a whole. Whereas if you simply build your charge, which is going to build both of those poles, whether it's more feminine for one, more masculine for or whatever that inner balance is inside of you, if you can build a charge while maintaining that balance, then you will magnetize with the other person, but you're doing it from a place that you are actually meant to complement one another. Two wholes becoming more than the two. Actually, the two wholes starting to form into three. Yes, exactly. You get a synergy. The whole is more than the sum of the parts in that equation. But if the two of you then have only really focused on building up one charge, imagine a magnet that just built its north pole, another magnet that only built its south pole. Well, those only come together to make a full magnet when they come together. But again, then you just have the sum of the parts.
Well, you see it everywhere in nature. There's seasons.
Yeah. There's
cycles in the day. There's different rhythms. There's a circadian rhythm, there's seasonal rhythms, there's the fertility cycle, there's life cycles, there's all kinds of cycles. Human beings, we're part of this greater nature, so we have those cycles. So trying to stay static and keep one thing and one thing only is impossible. It really breaks our psyche. It just messes with us.
Well, if you think about it, so if we've spoken about polarity, whatever the words are, let's say that, it is there. Let's be honest. One of the nice things about the polarity conversation is that as everything was becoming rather neutralized, or you'd have just relationships that fizzled out into grow because they became too much of in the friend zone. There was no polarity. There was no sexual charge there. Mm-hmm. And so then you go, well, what's missing is that there were these traditional roles, this kind of more masculine, this more feminine role, this yin role, this yang role. And they will, say that the mature versions of these, of course, include the balance of both. But as the work, frankly, I believe is stemming a lot more from where you will see kind of talk therapy leading, focusing on communication and shared values, which are extremely important. But the body, and especially, well, what is it that brings those roles out? Well, the sexuality. Are you actually penetrating physically? Are you being penetrated physically? Do you have a balance of both of those in you? Do you like to exchange that? As long as you can then start to actually go into practices that then sexually charge you up. And by sex, I don't mean just, going through and having penetrative sex. So that I think is definitely an underemphasized embodied practice between couples, is that you do these things And that's what I want to talk about in this next portion when we jump over is how do we actually charge things up sexually to then from that felt state keep us in alignment with our essence, and not from a rigid standpoint, but from a dynamic one where two couples, like a couple, you know, or a throuple or whatever it might be, or even just you with yourself, are from a felt state evolving, being dynamic, figuring out where you are, communicating with that power, and then also establishing what are those values by which you then express your boundaries, your desires, and your curiosities. And from there, come into an amazing, amazing partnership that leads to ever more pleasure, which of course will bring up more work, but it's so that way then you can create a better state of pleasure.
Well, I want to finish the public part with something from my bestie, who she once told me, she says, well, I don't do relationships unless it's an 80-20 rule. And I said, what do you mean by that? She goes, it has to be 80% fun and good and awesome, and then 20% work. When it goes even to 70-30, I start to a little flags go up. And so 50-50, really bad. And then the opposite, this is like a disaster. And so I thought about that for a while. I'm like, yes, I think too many of us have been given this idea that in order to be in relationship, it has to be hard. You have to have drama. There needs to be chaos. In fact, what that is dysregulated nervous systems coming into relationship together. And we're uncomfortable with peace. We're uncomfortable with ease because for whatever reason, maybe we were brought up in a really intense family life that didn't have any sense of quiet or safety or goodness or any of that. The good news though, as you were saying, with embodied practice, you can start for yourself first, getting into what does it feel like for me to have regulation or resonance, or the other word is coherence, like where I'm feeling all of myself and I feel relaxed and at home here. And then starting to choose the good people, the ones who are also regulated, where you can kind of interact and start to feel, oh, here I got a little bit off my center, but they gave me some good reflection. So now my center is a bit more strong so that the next time I engage, okay, here's what that is. And then there's fluidity and flexibility and strength that can develop. But when we allow the fantasy of dysregulated nervous systems as leading the way of humanity, of relationship, I'm not interested in that.
Well, essentially then you would be jumping into relationships that are just either reinforcing the trauma, lighting up your own wounds, and then calling it chemistry. And someone might argue with us and say, well, if you build up the sexual charge, how can you trust it? Because it's just going to lead you, it always leads me to like the same bad person or the wrong partner there, and I end up getting like some form of abuse or just something that doesn't go well, and they get led astray. Well, this is why we're saying how you build up your sexual charge, and by starting as well with yourself, you start to realize it's not just, hey, I want to build up like a stronger orgasm or whatever just turns me on the most. It's actually becoming present with what is there through a felt state, not presence like I'm going to do some eye gazing, but through a felt state, be able to address any pain, any numbness that you have, to be able to release that, whether it's a psychological pain or a physical one, fear, anxiety. We talk about these quite a lot. And can we then switch them into then the positive and grow that state to, like you said, the 80-20% versus where we see a lot of times people living, and it seems like the 90% work, 10%
maybe fun.
Maybe fun, or like the fun comes from having gone through the fight.
Yeah.
And so moving away from having the wounds lit up and being led to that because of the chemistry and sexual charge that you feel, either through kind of abstaining from it or just binging on it, but instead of having be a part of your regulated system and allowing pleasure to assume its original role of a compass towards health, not just physically, which is a whole other conversation, but also relationally.
Well, I think this is a good place to bump over. If you're not aware that we have the explicit side to this podcast, we do. You can find out more at embodiedlove.love and upgrade there. But on that side, we get more into the how-tos, very juicy stories. There's also an explicit audio that usually matches
Here we
the
talk
topic.
a little bit more about the what and the why.
Yeah, so that's what we're about to do right now.
Jump into the how-to and then do a little explicit recording, maybe?
There you go. We don't always do them on the same day. And sometimes we do the recording before we do the podcast. So
you can figure out which one happened for this one.
Yeah, exactly.
To join us for the complete and explicit version of this podcast, just simply upgrade your membership and you'll get instant access.